I want to teach you a tool that's going to show you that you're wrong almost all of the time. Is that a good tool, yes or no? Who'd be excited for their spouse to learn that tool? Now there's a different conversation going on. And this tool is called Notice and Imagine. Already I hear laughter. Now, this is not something I invented. This is an old tool from Gestalt therapy. It's called Notice and Imagine. Can you notice that I'm wearing a fashionable shirt? Can you notice that, yes or no? No. Can you notice I'm wearing a shirt? Can you imagine it's fashionable? Notice means what you actually can really tell is true. Imagine everything that goes into here is just three things. Three. Everything else goes in here. Your feelings, your opinions, your beliefs, even your educated guesses about what someone is doing right now in their life is all just an imagination. The only thing, bless you, that was a great one, good job. The only thing you can notice is what someone is wearing, what someone is saying, or what someone is doing. The only thing you can notice is what someone is wearing, as in what they look like, is what they're saying, the actual words, the cat sat on the mat, and what they're doing. I'm standing up, waving my hands. That's all you can notice. Everything else that you believe about that thing to be true, oh, the reason they're saying that is because they want me to do this, is actually an imagination. I want you to get how powerful this is. Let me ask you a question, aside from that. Are there things in our society that we like to be right about? Who likes to be right? Put your hands up if you like to be right. Okay? Everybody likes to be right. Let me ask you a question. In this day and age, do we have more information available to us now or less? More. And would you think that would add greater clarity to our ability to be able to be right about things? Should that add to our clarity, yes or no? Well, should it, yes or no? You might think it would, but does it actually create more confusion? Let me ask you a question. Who discovered Australia? Shout it out. Who do we say discovered Australia? Do we still have a statue somewhere in Melbourne for that? We have Cook's Cottage saying that. We still teach that in the schools. Do we still have a story that goes on in our culture that says Captain Cook discovered Australia? Do we still have that story going on, yes or no? Can everybody put their hand up if you know that Captain Cook did not discover Australia? And yet, I go to Melbourne and there's Cook's statue and there's Cook's Cottage and it's still in the books to say, well, Captain James Cook, and he just came here and discovered Australia, and that was the date, and we celebrate this occasion, and then he got killed by some Hawaiians, and yada, yada, yada. We know that's not true, and yet it's a story that we hang on to. Here's a different question. Put your hands up if you know who your parents are. Put your hands up if you know who your parents are. Leave your hand up if you've had a test. How do you know they're your parents? How do you know they didn't switch babies? Now, unless you had a home, I know that Wisdom is Karina's son because I watched him come out. I was in the room, was there when it all happened. Do I know that he's my son, or do I imagine it? Truthfully, do I know it, or do I imagine it? Which one? I imagine it. Now, this is sounding kind of weird, but this is really true. There's a lot of things that we notice and we think are true. And actually, in truth, we're actually making that up. So I want to give you an experience of this. So here's what I'd like to do. It's a little game we're going to do, and it's a real simple game. And in fact, before we play the game, here's why this is an important tool. Let me just check in. How many of you like to be right? How many enjoy being wrong? Okay. Who's ever had to enjoy being wrong? Okay. You're too old for this game. Who's ever had the experience at work or in a social situation where you found out that somebody else or some other group of people were saying something about what you'd done or what you'd said, and you'd now been judged about that, and yet you never actually got the chance to defend yourself or explain the truth or actually shed some light on what really happened. And then you actually got frustrated by that. It's like, damn, what do you mean they're saying that about me? I didn't do that, I did this. Has anybody had an experience like that? And is it frustrating not to be able to give the feedback when someone else already has their opinion and you can't even interrupt that and give them your fact because they've already noticed something and imagined what they noticed to be true? Is that frustrating, yes or no? Do you feel a little bit like indignant about it? It's like, it's not fair. Like they're making an opinion of me and then acting on that opinion, and their opinion's not right. Is that a frustrating thing to happen, yes or no? And it's kind of funny. Righteousness, which is actually just the disease of always wanting to be right, is the most awful thing you can possibly have in a relationship. In fact, it's toxic in a relationship. Nobody wants to live with someone who's always right or always wants to be right. Nobody wants to be in business with someone who's always right or always want to be right. And the challenge is that you need to invite into your life the possibility, in fact, the truth, that most of the time we're wrong. It's a tough concept to get your head around. Most of the time when we're dealing with relationships, more than half the time, hear me now, more than half of what you think about the person you love is wrong. Now some of you might be like, okay, Scott, I was loving this seminar up until now, and now you just lost me, because I know I'm wrong about some things, but surely I can't be wrong 50% about the time about the person I love. That can't be possibly true. Here's what we're going to do. We'll do a little quick game, and you'll learn how quickly, how wrong we are, and how much we make up. How many, even before I play this game, know someone who makes up a lot of stuff that ain't true? How many live with someone who makes up a whole bunch of stuff that's not true? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I just need a volunteer to come up here and just play a little game with me. A couple of questions, easy volunteer. Now, we're going to play a simple game called Notice and Imagine. And here's how this is going to work. I'm going to say something that I notice about Kim, and then I'm going to say what my imagining is. And I'm going to say something like, I notice you're wearing a hat. I imagine you think it looks cute. Now, already did you feel the response, all right? Now, here's the deal. In life, do you get the opportunity to give feedback when people form opinions of you? Do you get the chance to do that mostly, yes or no? No. So Kim is not going to be able to give any feedback to me at all. Is that going to be tough to do sometimes, yes or no? Totally. Will I see her wanting to give me feedback in her physiology? Now, the only time she can give me feedback is if I say something like, I notice you're wearing a fashionable hat. Is it a fashionable hat, yes or no? I notice she's wearing a hat. I imagine she thinks it's fashionable. I don't know if it's fashionable or not. It depends where. It might be fashionable here. It might not be fashionable in China. Does that make sense? So the only time she can give me feedback is if I actually have said the game wrong. So really important to say the words. So the words are, I notice. Say, I notice. I notice. You can only notice three things. What can you notice? You can notice what someone is wearing or. So you say, I notice you are blah, blah, blah. I imagine, so say I imagine that you, and then whatever my imagination is, my belief, my opinion, whatever it happens to be, no feedback, and then Kim can have a turn. So, I did the hat, your turn.
I notice you're wearing your wedding ring on your right hand. I imagine that's because you're left-handed.
I notice that you have some runners on. I imagine you are athletic. Is that a reasonable assumption to make, yes or no?
I notice you're wearing a black shirt because I imagine you didn't want to pick anything else today.
I notice that you have purple nails, and I imagine that you like the colour purple. Damn. But it's hard not to give feedback. It's important not to give feedback because in life, when it happens at work or in customers, you don't get the chance to give feedback. They form their opinion all by themselves and they take it off into the world. and they respond and act on it based on their opinion that they made up.
I noticed
I want you to get that. So,
doing this.
no, okay, is that an imagination or a notice? Yeah.
Okay.
So you could say something like, I noticed that you laugh a lot. I imagine you enjoy it.
Imagine you. Okay.
So it's right- or something like that.
I notice you pull people out of the audience, and I imagine that's to make them try and understand themselves.
Okay. I noticed that you have a lot of jewelry on. I imagine that you like jewelry. You know what? It might be. So I could actually. That's a good point. He just said, "Is it saying? It's saying a lot, and actually imagination." It's a good point. Really good. I can say, I notice you have 1, 2, 3, 4. I notice you have 4 pieces of jewelry on. I imagine you like jewelry. It's a good point. No, it's good.
I notice you.
Is there security? Can we get security?
I notice you have a different kind of headset on that I've ever seen on speakers before. I imagine it's because it's comfortable.
Great. Good job. Now, is she doing a good job? Yes or no? Yes. Give her a hand. Now, do you notice that there's not a lot of things you can notice? Are there a lot of things you can imagine? Yes or no? So I'm not going to explain this game anymore, and then we'll come back and chat about what just happened. For now, stand up. How many of you were just like bursting, like, oh, come on, let me just give them some feedback and clean that up? How many were like that? If you were, say aye. I saw all the laughing people like, no, that can't be true. Now, here's what I want to do. Let's do a quick poll. Firstly, while you were being the noticer, did you notice there's not many things you can notice? Yes. Who found out that after about 5 minutes, actually about 60 seconds for some of you, that there's not a lot of things that you can actually see about what's really going on with someone? Who found that to be true? If you did, put your hands up. Yeah, it's kind of curious. Who found that to be, while they were getting the feedback and getting the imaginings, who found it to be a fun experience? Like, who enjoyed hearing what other people had to say about why you're doing shit? Okay. Who was also experiencing maybe frustration at the lack of clarity they had about why you were doing some stuff? Who felt like they wanted to defend themselves as to why they were doing something? It's like, no, that's not right. It's funny. I wear my ring on my right hand. And no feedback. It's funny. We get given these imaginings from people and we feel like we want to defend ourselves. Now, the reason I'm giving this tool is not for letting go of defending yourself. The reason we're getting this tool is to really get, in our community, being right is highly valued. Challenge is, in a relationship, righteousness, which is the same as being right, is toxic to any relationship. If you have to deal with someone who's righteous about their food, like they're just righteous about it, they're like the perfect raw food, macrobiome. Are they a pain in the ass to be with, yes or no? Yeah, guess how I know that? So I was one of those people for a long time. It's like a 15-year period where I didn't get invited to a dinner party. I'm like, why is that? Righteousness about your physical workouts, your training, how to exercise perfectly, how to look perfect, how to groom perfect, how to do any of those things. Is that a pain in the ass to live with someone who's like that? Yes or no? Yes. And this could go on and on and on. We could do this about money. We could do about communication. We could do about everything. Righteousness is toxic. And being right is what we're taught to do in our society. Interesting thing is, let me just do this. How many of you in that 5 minutes, how many of you did like one turn, like one turn, one turn, one turn, one turn? How many of you had at least 4 or 5 turns each? Okay, most of the room. So you got a bit of an idea. How many of you, let's just take a bit of a polling around the room. Some of you just put your hands up and tell me what percentage was the person right about what they were saying about your t-shirt, your hat, your whatever it happens to be. About what percentage were they right? Just somebody put your hands up and just rough estimate. Dave? He was right all the time. You are with a mind-reading genius. I'm going to marry that person. Who else? Jazz? Happily, clearly. About 50%, okay. Okay, so cool. So you guys tell me, you got 70, 80, 30, 20, 80, 50, 100. Do you guys just tell me what's a fair number, and everything's always statistically just an average, what's a fair number you would say on average that they were right and that they were wrong? So what do you think they were right on average? What do you think?
60-40.
About 60-40? Is everyone okay with that? Say yes if you are. Okay, about 60-40. $60 right, and 40 just made up crap. Now, this was a 5-minute exercise. Most of you were being friendly and polite and playful and fun in the conversation. I'm hoping that's true for most of you, yeah? In the real world, when you deal with staff, customers, employees, teammates, your spouse, what do you think happens to this number of being right? Do you think it goes up or do you think it goes down? Who thinks it goes down? How much do you, just in your normal day-to-day life, what's just your normal day-to-day life, how much do you think it goes down just with someone you interact with maybe a couple of times a day, either at work or your distant family, or just how much do you reckon it goes down roughly? Just chuck out a number. So probably about reverses? So maybe 40-60? Who agrees with, or 50-50? Or worse? Who thinks worse? Oh wow, 90-10. Okay, that person's really in disconnect with people. Let's be gentle and say it goes to 40-60. Okay, let's be kind. Let's say 40% of the time they're still right. Okay, but 60% of the time they're still wrong. With your spouse, who you think you know, or your family, who you think that you know why they do stuff, what motivates them, and maybe you do, but maybe you don't. Do you think it goes up or it goes down? Down. When you're in distress with someone, when you're in upset with someone, when you're in kerfuffle with someone, does this number go up or does it go down? What number does it go down to? What number? Someone back there's like 0. What number does it go down to? Just roughly, what do you think? Let's call it 30-70. Okay, that's reasonable. Here's a question. Have you ever had someone at work or someone you're doing a deal with and someone pisses you off? When someone upsets you, do you have more communication with them or less? Less. So they don't return your phone call, they don't return your email, they don't come to the meeting, they upset you, or you heard that they did something to upset you, you have less communication with them. As you have less communication with them, do you have more imaginings or less imaginings? As you have more imaginings, does this number get bigger or smaller? It gets what? It gets what? So the more you're upset with someone, the more you distance yourself from them, the more you make up, and the wronger you are. And yet you stand your ground and go, well, I'm not going to go fix that. They should call me. Or they should fix it. Or they should come to the meeting. Or they should bring the report. Or they should have called me back. Or they should have whatever. So what happened, is it possible to say that when you're in disconnect with someone, that the numbers could be as crazy as that? Is that possible, yes or no? Is that possible? It's totally possible. And so here's the thing. If we don't know who discovered Australia, and we don't know who discovered America, unless you've had DNA testing, you don't really know who your parents are, is it possible that we don't know why that person didn't return my phone call? Is that possible, yes or no? Is it possible we don't know why they didn't pick their washing up off the floor? Is it possible we don't know that, yes or no? And so what I want you to think about is, at a minimum, I mean, these are crazy numbers, at a minimum, if you took on board that at least 50% of what you think is real, this is just a fair number. When you're in upset, do we all agree that in upset, that these numbers are reasonable? Do we all agree that, yes or no? So in your day-to-day life, when you're not even in upset or turmoil or confusion, at a minimum, half the time we're wrong. Half of what we think to be true about the person we're talking with, about why they called, why they didn't call, why they came to the meeting, why they filled the report in, yada, 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 half of what we think about them is wrong. If we did one simple thing, Would you like to fix this number with just one simple question? Would that be a useful tool to have, that question, yes or no? Who thinks that'd be a powerful tool? If you do, say aye. Here's the simple question. The simple question is, well, the first tool, the tool is this. The way to resolve your notice and imagining challenges is to use a powerful tool called Ask. There's a great book, it's called The Good Book, and it says the way to get everything you want is to, and if you ask, you shall. I didn't make the book up, it's been around for a while. If you ask, you'll find out. So when someone says something, honey, can you grab the salt? And you imagine that they said it directively or angrily or bossily or whatever, rather than imagining that and then responding to the imagination, I wonder what would happen if you asked and said, honey, I noticed when you asked for the salt that you were doing it, that it felt to me it was in a hurry. Is everything okay with you? Or is there something going on with you? Is there something else that we want to talk about? If you asked what was going on with someone, would that make a difference to your relationship with them, yes or no? As long as you know how to ask. You've got to use your skills, which is why, at a minimum, you want to be a level 3 communicator, get lots of great tools. Does that make sense? Understand how they like to have questions asked to them. Understand how many questions they can have asked to them. Some people, listen to this, some people don't like to have a lot of questions asked to them. I know from my wife, she loves it when I ask her 1 or 2 questions about how she's feeling, what's going on. 3 questions is the beginning of too much pressure. 4 questions and it's on. So I can say, honey, how are you feeling? Is everything okay? And how was your day? And that's enough. Any more questions, it's too many. Because she feels like, well, you're at me. You're at me all the time. I'm like, I'm not at you. I'm just asking you questions. So you've got to know how to ask and how many to ask. And you do that by paying attention, by listening, by watching. If you're living with them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years, you should be able to work that stuff out by just paying attention. So all you want to do is just ask. I noticed that you slammed the car door. Is everything okay? And that actually might also be an imagination. I noticed you shut the door heavily. Is everything okay? And you may not even have to say the first bit, but asking people what's really going on. So if someone doesn't return your email, if someone doesn't respond to your phone call, if someone doesn't come to the meeting, say, hey, Bill, I noticed you missed the meeting last week. I can't imagine what's going on for you. I wanted to make sure you got this message to come to this week's meeting. Rather than, he didn't call, I'm not even going to invite him to this week's meeting. I want you to get, would it be really powerful if you invited into your life the concept that maybe half the time you're thinking stuff, you're wrong? Would that be powerful, yes or no? Who thinks they've got this in their head already? Who thinks they understand this intellectually? Who'd like to have a physical experience of doing this right now in real life? Would you like to have that experience, yes or no?